Western weapons didn't just help Ukraine survive, they bought precious time for something even more dangerous to emerge. While Ukraine frantically developed its own domestic weapons industry from furniture factories and automotive plants, these 7 Western game changers gave NATO the confidence that this war could be prolonged. Every piece of equipment, every round of ammunition, every truckload of weapons, and every benefits package meant Ukraine could fight for another day, all because they had the adaptability to survive the initial onslaught in February 2022. But here's the thing, Ukraine was fighting with a severe handicap. It had inherited Soviet-era equipment designed in the 1970s, pitting its paltry arsenal against Russian President Vladimir Putin's modern military machine. Western weapons leveled the playing field, and then they shattered it entirely. Let's dive into the deadliest pieces of Western military hardware that have turned Ukraine from an underdog to an absolute nightmare for Russian forces. Number 1. HIMARS. When the first high-mobility artillery rocket system rolled off American transport planes in June 2022, Russia's entire military started sweating. Here was a truck-mounted launcher that could deliver a 200-pound guided warhead anywhere within 50 miles and hit within 10 feet of its intended target. On the surface, the HIMARS system is elegantly simple, yet devastatingly effective. The nose cone carries a satellite guidance system that gives the rocket its sniper-like accuracy. The system works with just 3 operators, and those soldiers could be effectively trained to use it within a week. At a hide site, the HIMARS crew tries to conceal itself from enemy surveillance. Once it leaves for its firing position, the HIMARS is liable to be spotted and targeted, so the clock starts ticking. Before HIMARS, Ukraine was fighting an artillery war with Soviet-era systems that took minutes to set up and deploy. Against Russia's significant numerical advantage, this old equipment was a death sentence for its operators, especially when the war devolved into one of high surveillance, which we'll delve into slightly more with one of our other weapon systems. Ukraine's existing howitzers had roughly half of the HIMARS range, while also relying on relatively ineffective artillery ammunition and being grossly inaccurate to boot. Between June and September 2022, the US shipped Ukraine around 40 HIMARS launchers and thousands of rockets, which defense officials say the Ukrainians have used to attack more than 350 Russian command posts, ammo dumps, supply depots, and other high-value targets far back from the front lines up until today. The HIMARS and other long-range systems have given the Ukrainians the ability to reach out and hit targets that the Russians would have thought was safe in 2022. Even more importantly, HIMARS, being one of the few modern systems that Ukraine received from the West, compelled Russia to try and adapt to incoming changes in Ukraine's arsenal, with mixed results. One of the few ways to counter medium to long-range artillery fire is to use even longer-range radar systems. Russian radar proved to be extremely unreliable when under duress, whether due to operator error, technical difficulties, electronic warfare, or sheer lack of efficiency and overblown technical specifications. Either way, Ukraine has managed to use HIMARS to punish Russian logistics systems, trying to reach its units on the front, striking vital stationary targets and depots that will be used for resupplying or as command posts. But here's where it gets ugly for Russia. In May 2024, Ukraine was given permission to use GMLRS and other NATO-donated long-range weaponry on Russian territory, as in the land owned by Russia before the war started. The HIMARS strikes continued and extended their reach, destroying and damaging launchers along with other components of the Russian long-range S-300, S-400 surface-to-air missile system in the Belgorod region of Russia. However, for all the good it did in the first 2 years of the war, this equipment doesn't come without its downsides. HIMARS has been the regular target of Russia's jamming and electronic warfare capabilities, which have greatly reduced its effective accuracy from a 10-foot circular error probable to over 50 feet, meaning that half the missiles end up going more than 50 feet off mark. Another problem is that the range of the HIMARS, while being generous compared to Soviet-era weapons, is still limited. While each HIMARS can theoretically carry and deploy a single long-range missile, the Army Tactical Missile System, those haven't been supplied by the US in large enough numbers to matter. This meant that Russia pulled back some of its vital logistics and military equipment, and the HIMARS lost most of its vital targets due to being primarily used on stationary or slow-moving objects. Number 2. Western drone swarms. Out of all the weapon systems that were pioneered or showcased in Ukraine, the various types of drones deserve the most mention. While they weren't the most pivotal in the first few months of the invasion, or at least not compared to traditional missile and anti-air systems that allowed Ukraine to counter the relentless artillery strikes, drones would end up becoming front and center of Ukraine's battle strategy. In fact, during the first half of 2025, roughly 70% of Russia's military losses were attributed to various types of drones. And even though Ukraine has managed to build one of the world's largest and most diverse drone industries, which we've discussed in one of our previous videos, some of the Western weapons ended up being the driving factors for that innovation. In the early months of the war, the Pentagon made headlines by announcing that it was sending the secretive Phoenix Ghost systems to Ukraine. The key piece here was the Dominator, a Group 3 UAS, short for Unmanned Aerial System, with over 5 hours of flight endurance, a range of about 300 miles, a top speed of 55 knots, and a 37-pound frag or penetrator payload capacity. According to the manufacturer's website, these loitering munitions achieve autonomous flight through algorithms and sensor fusion, enabling them to navigate, make decisions, and complete missions without direct intervention, using visual-based navigation to autonomously identify and follow landmarks or features in their environment, enabling precise positioning and pathfinding without reliance on GPS. Another notable addition to the US arsenal is the Switchblade 600, a kamikaze drone that has a range of around 25 miles, can fly for roughly 40 minutes, a sprint speed of 115 miles per hour, and can carry an anti-armor warhead. The entire loadout weighs about 65 pounds, making it one of the heavier anti-tank drones developed for use in the Ukraine war. Contrary to most drones, the Switchblade is launched via tube and doesn't require an external sensor to track its targets. The guidance system allows the operator partial control in changing targets mid-operation. And while these two drones would bolster Ukraine's precision strike capabilities at short range, another Western system would form the bulk of its reconnaissance capabilities for a bird's-eye view of the battlefield: Jump 20. The Jump 20 is a Group 3 fixed-wing vertical takeoff and landing or VTOL platform with a range of an astonishing 115 miles and a payload capacity of up to 30 pounds. One of the critical features of this airplane-like drone is its runway independence, allowing the system to be set up and operational in less than an hour without specialized deployment and recovery equipment. Other surveillance drones followed suit. Black Hornet nano drones provided dismounted soldiers with covert situational awareness, transmitting live video and HD still images back to their operators. Meanwhile, Scan Eagle is a long-endurance ISR platform that can operate at altitudes of up to 19,500 feet. With these drones, Ukraine suddenly gained eyes and lethal reach extending hundreds of kilometers behind enemy lines, something they never possessed in their Soviet arsenal. Until the country started relying more on domestic and converted commercial drones, dedicated military drones provided just enough staying power. Number 3. F-16 Fighting Falcons. When the first F-16s touched Ukrainian soil in July 2024, Russia's Air Force got its first real challenger in over 3 years of war. These weren't museum pieces, these were battle-tested, modernized killing machines. The first examples seen flying over Ukraine are donated from the Netherlands and Denmark and are mid-life upgrades of the older Block 15 variant, incorporating avionics, weapons, and performance improvements from newer Viper versions onto the aging airframes. Images from Ukraine show the jets have been equipped with a family of defensive upgrades: the Electronic Combat Integrated Pylon System from Elbit and Terma, the AN/ALQ-162 jammer from Northrop Grumman, and the AN/AAR-60 missile warning system from Hensoldt. Before the F-16s, Ukraine had around 120 Soviet-era aircraft, all of which were accumulating flight hours at an accelerated rate and were already considered obsolete when the war started. And while Ukraine did try to do its best with the upkeep of its fighter jets, the losses mounted quickly. Out of the 72 Su-27s, over 30 were lost within 3 years, with the majority of the losses occurring in the first year of the war. The reason why the F-16s were considered pivotal to changing the game in aerial warfare is their effective range and reliability. The jets could outmaneuver older Russian contemporaries and deploy suites of air-to-air missiles to counter long-range strikes. In one example, a Ukrainian-operated F-16 shot down 6 Russian cruise missiles in a single sortie. The pilot even used the aircraft's main cannon to destroy 2 of the missiles, showcasing both the skill of the trained Ukrainian pilots and the platform's versatility. Another Ukrainian F-16 has shot down a Russian Su-35 fighter over Kursk using an AIM-120 AMRAAM active radar-guided missile. The aforementioned missile is one of the main ways the F-16s are truly useful to Ukraine. Being one of the most adaptable weapons platforms, the F-16 is compatible with a vast array of NATO-manufactured missiles, allowing the country to donate their aging weapons to Ukraine to be put to good use. And the F-16s have only been the start of Ukraine's Air Force revolution. In early 2025, they were joined by France's Mirage 2005 air superiority fighter jets, which come with separate weapon systems to provide much-needed redundancy and increased operational capacity. In fact, it's estimated that Ukraine is flying its new aircraft ragged, cementing the need for even more aircraft, as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had previously noted that the country's air force is still lacking dozens of F-16s. Number 4. The Patriot missile systems. When Putin unleashed his hypersonic Kinzhal missiles, Ukraine's donated Patriot batteries calmly shot them down like clay pigeons. The message was clear: your wonder weapons are obsolete. The PAC-3 Patriot Advanced Capability 3 variant uses hit-to-kill technology, designed to destroy incoming threats by directly colliding with them, rather than detonating nearby. The PAC-3 also offers high missile density per launcher, with up to 16 PAC-3 missiles per canister, compared to 4 for the older PAC-2. The accompanying AN/MPQ-65 radar provides 360-degree coverage and can track up to 100 targets simultaneously. The radar's ability to detect and prioritize threats at ranges exceeding 60 miles means that it's one of the most comprehensive mobile anti-air systems in existence, justifying the $1.1 billion price tag attached to a single battery, which includes the launcher, missile storage, radar and antenna array, power banks, and a command center. Patriots were similar to many other Western donations in that they allowed Ukraine breathing room to develop domestic strategies. Ukraine entered the war with Soviet-era S-300 systems that were designed to fight 1980s threats. Against modern ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and hypersonics, they were virtually helpless. In November 2024, a Patriot battery in Kyiv intercepted a salvo of Russian hypersonic missiles, a feat that underscored the system's capability against cutting-edge threats. As of 2025, Ukraine has received 7 Patriot batteries, with one of them considered to be a replacement or a partial battery to accompany another system. However, the protection that a Patriot system provides comes at a staggering price. Each PAC-3 MSE missile costs $4 million a pop and is technically more expensive than a missile that Russia might use on any given day. With these missiles in short supply, Ukraine has been hesitant to use them, and larger salvos have a chance of going through anyway. In one case, all 9 missiles sent as part of a larger strike that included over 900 drones got through Ukraine's defenses. The Russians also adapted with upgraded Iskander-M ballistic missiles, making them harder for Patriot systems to intercept, with radar decoys and a quasi-ballistic trajectory. Number 5. Javelin anti-tank missiles. No Western weapon has achieved more iconic status in this war than the FGM-148 Javelin. Dubbed Saint Javelin in Ukrainian memes, this shoulder-fired tank killer became the symbol of David defeating Goliath, one missile at a time. Once a missile is launched from the Javelin, it travels at a rate of 1,000 feet per 7 seconds while being guided by an infrared seeker. The first of the 2 high-explosive warheads explodes against the reactive armor, enabling the second warhead to reach and puncture the target's main armor. The Javelin's combined warheads can penetrate steel up to 31.5 inches thick, which comfortably goes through modern tank plating. With an effective range of over 1.5 miles, the Javelin gives its operator a modicum of safety and its target a minimal window to respond. But the biggest benefit of the Javelin is the infrared seeker. Being a fire-and-forget system, a soldier could aim, let loose, and then scurry out of the retaliating fire or start reloading for a second shot. The seeker round will try to take care of the rest. The statistics from the Pentagon reported that out of the first 112 Javelin missiles fired by Ukrainians, 100 struck their targets, which equates to an accuracy rate of 89%. As of January 2024, the United States has delivered more than 10,000 Javelin missiles to Ukraine and 50 Javelin command launch units. In 2022, the US created a contract with the manufacturer Lockheed Martin to boost production from 2,000 to 4,000 units per year, with the surplus going directly to Ukraine. This meant that Ukraine should ideally be receiving around 2,000 Javelins per year to replace some of the used equipment. Number 6. Storm Shadow missiles. The UK's Storm Shadow deliveries in May 2023 presented one of the first major donations of contemporary weapons from the European part of NATO, giving Ukraine much-needed redundancy in its longer-range operation. In essence, they wound up becoming the first options for high-priority targets to counter Russia's logistics and supply runs, allowing Ukraine precision strike options that were far above Soviet-era missile capabilities. The Franco-British Scalp-EG, or Storm Shadow, manufactured by MBDA, are stealthy air-launched missiles that can strike targets over 150 miles away and have an explosive payload of 1,000 pounds, designed to destroy hardened targets such as tanks, bunkers, and even bridges. Its navigation system combines GPS, onboard guidance systems, and terrain mapping for electronic warfare countermeasures, as it's highly unlikely all 3 systems can be successfully disabled. What made the Storm Shadows a godsend for Ukraine was that they didn't need a distinct battery launcher or platform. The country's current stock of Su-24s needed minimal modifications to accept and deploy the missile, allowing already experienced Ukrainian pilots a much-needed edge in domestic missions. Practically as soon as they were given to Ukraine, Storm Shadow missiles were reportedly used in an attack on industrial sites in the Russian-held city of Luhansk. The Storm Shadow missile was also used to strike a Russian command post in Zaporizhia Oblast, resulting in the death of Major General Sergei Goryachev. In 2023, Storm Shadow missiles were used in a strike against the Chonhar road bridge, which connects Crimea with Kherson Oblast. The attack significantly hampered Russian logistics and transportation. Furthermore, with Ukraine getting the green light to use these weapons to bombard Russia, the Storm Shadow has gained another layer of strategic capabilities despite its limited supply hampered by relatively high costs of $1 to $2 million and small production runs. Number 7. Bradley Fighting Vehicles. The initial months of the invasion showed that tanks were slowly becoming less and less important in the grand scale of modern warfare. Infantry fighting vehicles like the Bradley took that notion to its limits, giving a tank-like performance at a fraction of the cost and with far more adaptability. The Bradley has a powerful 25mm chain gun and TOW missiles that can make it effective against tanks. The TOW missiles in particular can outrange contemporary Russian tanks thanks to the IFV's higher engagement range and advanced optics systems. The M2 contains a crew of 3, a commander, a gunner, and a driver, and can carry 6 fully equipped soldiers as passengers. As a squad on wheels, the system's capability to outgun a tank while also allowing Ukraine's infantry to move long distances at higher speeds — the Bradley moves at about 41 miles per hour at max speed — gave it an edge that Ukraine would need to make the most of, and it did. In January 2024, a pair of Ukrainian M2A2 Bradleys from the 47th Mechanized Brigade engaged and disabled a Russian T-90M tank at close range with their autocannons in Stepova, Ukraine. The vehicles used their optic systems to engage the tanks from afar, while their better maneuverability meant the tank missed its first and only chance to retaliate. Furthermore, Bradleys having great armor and maneuverability make them less of a cage for the infantry passengers. As of mid-2025, Oryx reported that 177 of the donated Bradleys had been confirmed as destroyed, damaged, abandoned, or captured. This is over half of the donated platforms, but here's the crucial context. Open source data from Oryx confirmed that Russia has lost over 6,000 IFVs within the first 3 years, a staggering figure that underscores the vehicle's vulnerabilities. Out of those, over 760 BMP-3s were lost, which are considered Bradley contemporaries. So where does that leave us? 3 years into this grinding war, these 7 weapon systems have fundamentally altered the balance of power. They demonstrated that Western military technology, when properly employed, can neutralize numerical disadvantages and technological gaps. Furthermore, they did so at far lower numbers than NATO arsenals actually have in their stockpiles. Remember, F-16s that were donated to Ukraine were meant to go to scrapyards, as the host countries are actively replacing them with F-35s. The US itself has around 1,600 fighter jets at its disposal, making the 90 or so jets in Ukraine a paltry fleet by comparison. The missile batteries and long-range missiles donated by NATO represent the production surpluses that the alliance believes it can restock over the next few years. None of the alliance's actual active weapons are being delivered in large enough numbers to make a dent in its arsenals. This is coupled with the fact that Russia's increased aggression prompted NATO leaders to jumpstart military procurement programs. Germany, one of the world's largest economies, is considering a significant shift in defense finance. More importantly, they were technically only a stopgap measure. The weapons gave Ukraine the most precious commodity in warfare: time. Time to build domestic production, train troops, adapt tactics, and create a new line of offensive weaponry that Russia wouldn't be prepared for. And Vladimir Putin is still trying to figure out how this 3-day special military operation turned into a multi-year nightmare that's cost him over 1 million casualties and half his modern military. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned to The Military Show for more analyses and news reports.